So I have some news. I quit my sewing job. I actually quit my job a bit ago. It didn't literally just happen. And I already have another job doing something completely different. But I wanted to talk about why I quit because in previous videos about my job, which I've linked in the description box, I gave a pretty rosy picture of what the job was like. And all of the things I said were true, but I also want to nuance it with a bit more honesty this time. So I knew this wasn't going to be a forever job, and I actually never intended to stay very long. The first reason for that is that the job was in Montreal, but my partner lived in a different city 2 hours away, and I knew I didn't want to be away from him for very long. The second reason is that my ultimate career goal is to work in fashion and/or technical design, and I thought that getting experience as a sewing machine operator in a production setting would be really valuable. And after all these years of paying for courses to learn about sewing and pattern making and garment construction, I was like, I want to get paid to learn for once. And obviously, all of that reveals the huge amount of privilege that I have. I was there by choice. I had specific skills and knowledge that I wanted to gain, and once I got what I wanted from the job, I was able to leave and find a much better paying job somewhere else. That is unfortunately not the case for many of the people working there. Of course, some of them do have a real passion for sewing and love what they do, but a lot of people are there because they need a job. They don't have advanced English or French skills, so they don't have a lot of options, and they kind of feel stuck there, which is hard to see, obviously, as someone, who cares about other people and wants them to be happy. In terms of actual working conditions, I would sum it up as not perfect, but could definitely be worse. You hear horror stories of sewing factories all over the world, including in quote-unquote developed countries, where, labor laws aren't followed, where there is wage theft, where the working conditions are extremely dangerous or unsanitary, etc. And thankfully, that was certainly not the case here. Labor laws were assiduously followed. Cleanliness was taken quite seriously. There were cleaning staff on site at all times. We got our workstations vacuumed every day. Surfaces were regularly sanitized, etc. In terms of safety, there were clear emergency procedures in place, and the company did also take measures to prevent accidents. For instance, all the machines had finger guards, which you are not allowed to take off, in order to prevent things like sewing through your finger. I still managed to somehow poke my finger with the needle. I have a talent for that, but that is not the company's fault. That is my fault for not following procedure. There were also rules about appropriate footwear and clothing and tying long hair back and stuff like that to prevent injuries, and I didn't witness any accidents or injuries while I was there. So basic safety and hygiene and stuff like that was absolutely not a problem. In terms of things that could be improved, the pay was not great. The starting salary was minimum wage, which is, I think, $15.25 per hour in Quebec. There was the possibility of earning more money if you sewed fast enough, but to be honest, I never really understood how that worked or how fast you had to sew and how much extra money you could actually make. The information about that in the contract was fairly vague, as I recall, and I never bothered to seek clarification because I knew I wasn't going to be staying very long. I sewed pretty quickly, I think anyway, but if I was making more than minimum wage, it definitely was not very much more. There was a little machine next to our workstations that tracked how fast we sewed, so if I had to learn to use that properly, I probably would have understood exactly how much I was making and how fast I was going, but again, it just wasn't a priority for me. I think it is conceivable that some employees at the factory would be making decent money, like $10 or more per hour above minimum wage, but I don't know that for sure, and I don't know exactly how many employees that would apply to. Another thing that would be nice is more paid sick days. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the government of Quebec requires employers to pay 2 paid sick days per year to employees who have worked for them for at least 3 months. In my opinion, that is really not enough, especially because essentially we were 400 people all in one giant room. So if somebody gets sick, it spreads around. I have never been sick so frequently in my life. Like every 2 to 3 weeks, literally, I was like, oh boy, here we go again. I've got another sore throat. Now, granted, I was never very sick. It was primarily just very minor colds where a sore throat was the main symptom. But still, I thought I had a good immune system before, but I guess I just wasn't in a room with 400 people very often. Lastly, in terms of things I think could be improved, the job itself was kind of rough in various ways. For example, it was assembly line style, so everybody had 1 to 2 jobs that they just did all day, every day, and that of course can get a bit tedious. Now, things did get changed up every once in a while. If we started producing a new style, then often there would be new jobs associated with that, or if a particular job had no more work, then they'd give you something else to do. There were also employees called floaters who basically they didn't have one set job. They had to know how to do all the jobs and could be called on to do anything at any time, and they got paid a little bit more. In my case, I was not a floater, but because I had fairly strong sewing abilities and was known to my supervisors, they would often give me other jobs to do. So that, compared with the fact that I knew I wasn't staying very long, meant that I really didn't get bored. But I know that that was not the case for a lot of people. Obviously, this assembly line style is very advantageous to a company for a number of reasons compared to a model where employees would just make an entire garment from start to finish. It's a much more efficient use of time and space, and it means that you don't have to hire workers with a lot of experience, because if you're just teaching them one job, they can get proficient at that job pretty quickly, even if they don't have any sewing experience. Whereas if employees were making entire garments, they would need a much higher skill level, which would mean either hiring much more experienced employees, which might be hard to find, or investing a lot more time and money in training. So I get why they do it this way, but it does mean that the job can be pretty mind-numbing. Repetitive strain injuries are also a concern. Sewing for 8 hours a day, 4 days a week, and then only 5 hours a day on Friday, which was admittedly very, very nice, can obviously lead to various issues. The company did take some measures to mitigate these issues. I noticed that some people had special chairs or even cushions on their chairs to make it more ergonomic, but more probably could have been done. So that's the good and the bad of sewing in a factory and why I ultimately left. Overall, I did have a good experience. I really loved sewing and I learned a lot, and I knew it was temporary, which I think ultimately allowed me to enjoy it as much as I did. The people I worked with were definitely the best part. Everyone I worked with had a heart of gold, and even though we didn't always speak the same language, we managed to form really strong bonds, which I will never forget. If you're looking for the sweetest, kindest people in this world, you may just find them at a sewing factory. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.